Previously on, did I get what I paid for? Jess, we have an incoming transmission.
My name is Shmi Marrow Valent of the Hoskin Empire. Give me the Omega-3.
Transmission strength increasing by 3,000%.
Not another sketch trying to reference the movie. That is so 2021.
You made Star Trek jokes in all 3 episodes.
No, I didn't. I just used simple knowledge of how you and Nick think.
Then yeah, you're right. 3 wishes.
You can't just stop the review.
The hell I can't. Oh, Silo. I want to use one of my wishes.
On.
Look, I'll watch Mickey and the Beanstalk, but I wish I could skip to the rant, rap, and verdict without pissing off the guild.
Ready to go.
I have these 3 holdover movies that the crew requested a while back, and I kind of don't want to do them right now. I'm not saying never do them, but I just had to go through 3 episodes without making a Star Trek reference, so
Come on, say it.
I wish I could do a 3-part Star Trek-themed season finale.
Okay, here you go. Our next episode.
Star Trek Enterprise Season 1? I reviewed this at the beginning of the season.
Keep telling you, you watched Quantum Leap, not Enterprise. And it's not really the season finale, since we do have to do something Captain America related in July. Or is that going to be more like a Doctor Who holiday special?
Nick, we've got a problem.
What is it this time?
I went to recycle the script for the original Enterprise episode, and the file was corrupted.
Oh my god, for the last time, you reviewed Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap. I can show you.
Oh boy. But then, how did I time travel in the first place? What the fuck is that?
The Quantum Leap episode.
Why is it so fuzzy?
You went back to 1991. It's a copy of a VHS tape that had been exposed to high-intensity tachyon radiation and spent 30 years on a shelf at Goodwill before being digitized using a firewire cable, bazooka gum, and lousy freeware. We're not exactly THX limited.
Okay, I'll write a new script. We'll do the usual good episode, bad episode, mediocre episode, and take an average for the verdict.
Are you sure? When you did that for Quantum Leap, that took an hour.
We'll see how many I can get through today.
The obvious bad episode is the ripoff of Schwarzenegger and DeVito's hit, Junior.
Unexpected? Nah, everyone does that one. Same goes for Strange New World and Terra Nova. So I'm stuck with Broken Bow. Where's Ralph so we can get started?
Oh, he and Xylo went to the second dimension for a canoe tour of Escher Falls.
Huh?
Jess, I know this happens half the time you review Star Trek, but, you know that word I can't pronounce, temporal anomaly alarm. Temporal Nah, you know the word.
You know, it's a good thing that happened on the first day of a 3-day shoot where I cut myself shaving and wanted to disguise that I was shooting the episode out of sequence. Our story begins with this boy and his dad painting a model starship. The boy quotes Zephram Cochrane. His dad says your lost uncle would be proud. The boy asks, when can she fly? His dad says, wait for the paint to dry. The boy says, no, I mean the one you're working on. His dad says, it isn't even built yet. And at the rate our Vulcan consultants are going, it'll be ready when you're about 45. The boy asks, is it true what I've heard? That the space elves are keeping things from humanity? His dad says, yeah, but please, don't use racial slurs. Have you ever stopped and thought about it for a minute? Their civilization is twice as old as ours. Maybe, just maybe, they're trying to stop us from making the same mistakes they did. The boy says, really? Dad says, nah, of course not. Don't be stupid. Flash forward 30 years to this cornfield in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. This linebacker for the New York Giants is being chased by these lizard guys with laser guns. The farmer sees this and goes back to his house to get his gun. Clang the Klingon hides in a grain elevator and locks the door. The lizard guys stretch under it like they were made out of silly putty. The Klingon escapes through a hatch at the top, fires his weapon, and blows it up, lizard guys and all. He tries to explain what happened, but Farmer Joe doesn't speak Klingon and shoots him. Then comes the first controversial moment of the show, the theme song. Faith the Heart was originally written for the movie Patch Adams. Not being an original song and having lyrics pissed off a lot of Star Trek fans. To me, that's not the problem. The song actually fits what the show is about. It's how Jonathan Archer sees himself. No, to me, the fuck up is using the Russell Watson version when your show stars Scott, Rock the Redhead, Bakula. Speaking of our lead, we finally meet our hero, Captain Jonathan Archer. Only it turns out we met him before. Remember that kid? Yeah, him. He and his co-pilot, Charles Trip Tucker III, are taking a shuttle pod up to space dock to see their pride and joy, the United Earth vessel, registration number NX-01, USS Enterprise. Everything is perfect. Even the nacelles are painted the color Archer's dad wanted. They get a call telling them to meet Admiral Forrest at Starfleet Medical. It's about that Klingon from earlier. 3 doctors, including an alien, are trying to save his life. All of Starfleet's top brass and 3 Vulcans are discussing the issue. Ambassador Saval says, the Klingons are getting pissy, so let's make this quick. The Admiral's aide says, we think we should have some say in this. It is our planet. Saval says, no worries, we'll tell you everything you need to know when we get back. The aide says, uh-huh. Archer and Trip show up and want to be read in. Forrest says, sorry, John, because of all this, the Vulcans have decided to delay your launch. Archer says, first it was because we only had one public restroom on the ship. Then it was because we didn't have cup holders. Come on, just let us go into space already. Saval says, if you want to make an enemy of the Klingon Empire, go on ahead. The second Vulcan says, yeah, We talked the Klingons into letting us deliver the guy's corpse back to them. If we hadn't, they'd already be on their way to annex your planet. Archer sees the doctors are still working on him. He goes into the operating theater and asks the alien doctor, "Hey, is that guy dead?" Phlox says, "Nah, Klingons have redundant anatomy. He'll be fine." Archer goes out to the admirals and the Vulcans and says, "We can't deliver the corpse of a living person. That's kinda murder." Saval says, "They're a warrior race. They view disgrace as worse than death. We're respecting their culture by doing this." Archer says, "Are we supposed to do this because you said so?" The Vulcans say, "No, because they said so." Which, fair point. Admiral Forrest is on the Vulcan side. He says we should defer to their judgment. Archer says, "Fuck that." T'Pol, the Vulcan woman who has remained silent until now, says that if you could look beyond your limited human ethos, you'd see it's all good. Archer says, "Fine then, give me my ship. I can have her ready to go in 3 days. We can deliver that Klingon home alive, or your pizza's free." One of the Admiral's aides says, "Your communications officer is in Brazil. You don't even have a first officer, a science officer, or a medical officer yet." Archer says, "Give me 3 days." Saval says, "Admiral, you can't seriously be considering this." Forrest says, "John's right. We've been waiting for a century. If not now, when?" Saval says, "You're making a big mistake." Archer says, "You look pissed off. I thought Vulcans didn't have emotions." The Vulcans storm off. Forrest looks to Archer and smiles. "That's why I brought you in. Thanks, buddy." The Admiral leaves. Archer walks over to the glass of the operating theater and knocks on the window. The alien doctor looks up, nods, and knows exactly what Archer needs. Meanwhile, on the ship, Travis Mayweather and Malcolm Reed are sitting around the transporter room. This newly acquired piece of tech has recently been approved for organic use. They debate whether that means food or people. Reed says he doesn't want to be the first person to try it. They look at what came up from the starbase. Reed says he had asked for power coils but gotten valve sealant. This is why there will always be some items that are better to get from brick and mortar stores. Mayweather asks, "We're taking a sick guy home. Why do we need weapon systems?" Reed says if half the things I've heard about the Klingons are true, we're not just going to need weapon systems, we're going to need to weaponize systems that were never designed to be weapon systems. Mayweather says, "Or we could play Slim Whitman over subspace." We get some jibber jabber about their background, which is cool and all, but not important to the episode. But they have to fill some time while they go down to engineering to make sure the set gets built. Then we cut to this school in Brazil where this woman is teaching gibberish? Or maybe not, because it turns out Hoshi Sato is not this series' sex appeal. She's an exolinguist. Archer walks in. She tells the class to practice on their own. She tells Archer this class is 2 weeks away from final exams. Archer says, "Yeah, but the ship needs you now, and I could order you." She says, yeah, but that would require a recall order and a disciplinary action, which means I wouldn't be allowed on board ship until after a court-martial. Archer just whistles and plays some Klingon on his iPod. She sounds intrigued. She says that sounds like it came from the Vulcan lingual database. Archer says, yep. She replies, I thought the Vulcans didn't want us doing this. Archer says, they don't. I had to make quite a few compromises, including signing all their King Thunder records, in order to get this. She says, fine, fine. I'll conduct the last few classes using Blackboard and Zoom. Later, Archer explains the bargain to Trip. The Vulcans agreed to give them a limited translator for the 80 Klingon dialect plus star chart to get them there, but they get to put an observer on the bridge. Trip says he would trust anyone other than a Vulcan in the science officer position, even Porthos. Archer's dog shoots him a dirty look. T'Pol comes in to report for duty, and she complains about the smell. Archer apologizes for Porthos, but she says she's trained not to take offense. Then Trip introduces himself, offers his hand, and she rolls her eyes. Archer says while you're on this ship, you're under my command, and my first order is that if anything I say in this cabin or on the bridge makes its way back to the ball, I am shoving you out the airlock at warp 10. She says, do you think I want to be here? No, once this mission is over, I'm back to Vulcan. Because this episode needs a little bit more padding in order to justify the 90-minute runtime, we get the ship's commissioning ceremony. Admiral Forrest makes a speech about Zephyr Cochrane and the 100 years of friendship between humanity and Vulcans. He admits that now is the time for space to find out what the human race can do. Since Zephyr Cochrane and Henry Archer developed the Warp 5 engine, there's something bittersweet about the fact that Jonathan Archer will be in command of the first ship to use it. All of his compliments about the Vulcans are sort of backhanded. Sort of like if I was ever forced to compliment Mike Pence. The piece de resistance is showing clips from Zephyr Cochrane's famous speech. The senior staff head up to the bridge. Archer has a brief flashback to playing with anti-grav toys with his dad. Then he orders Mayweather to take them out. Meanwhile, on some other ship somewhere, one of those lizard guys goes into this room and becomes double exposed. He starts talking to this blurry shadow guy. The boss asks him about the Klingon. The lizard guy says Archer has him. The shadow guy says, yeah, did you lose any operatives? The lizard says, yeah, and he was my best friend. Fix it. The shadow guy says, sorry, not part of the contract. Don't call me, I'll call you, capiche? Later, Archer goes to see how Phlox is adjusting to sickbay. It's strange. Half of the stuff is super high-tech things that no one else seems to have any idea how to use, and the rest looks like it came out of a cleric's bag of holding. Archer asks Phlox, what did you like about Earth? Phlox says, human optimism and Chinese food. But mostly Chinese food. Archer says, then I'm sorry to have to take you away from that. Phlox says, are you kidding? I was just about to start a study about how humans react to stress. This mission will give me the perfect chance to do that. I can't wait. Archer is beginning to regret hiring this guy. Phlox reminds him, hey, I've treated a Klingon before. Not a live one, but you know. Archer says you have 80 hours to figure it out before we arrive on Kronos. Trip is crawling through a Jeffries tube. He comes across Mayweather hanging upside down from the ceiling. Trip says, "What the hell?" Travis explains that every starship has a point where two artificial gravity fields overlap, creating a pocket of zero G. Pretty cool, huh? And it is. Only don't expect to see it again. After all, this is pre-holodeck era Star Trek. Once the crew finds out about it, you know what they'd be doing there all the time. And Trip and Travis's conversation more or less proves it. Then Trip goes to have dinner with the captain, but he's running late. Archer has been having small talk with DePaul about all the sights she saw, only she hasn't been anywhere. She then tries eating breadsticks with a fork. Not as big a crime as eating pizza that way, but close enough. She explains that Vulcan customs say you never eat with your hands.
So humans not embracing other cultures, bad. Vulcans not embracing other cultures, good.
Yeah. They furthered the insult with a steak dinner. Vulcans are such extreme vegans that even PETA tells them to ease off a bit. Paul whines that humans claim to be enlightened, but they still eat meat. Archer says, just look at where we were 50 years ago and you'll see we've made a lot of progress. Later on the bridge, people are debating whether or not they can feel a difference between traveling at different warp speeds. Some say they can and some say they can't. Paul says stop being stupid. Hoshi, tired of being insulted, swears at her in Vulcan. It must be a case where she only learned the profanity, because she actually asked DePaul to teach her the language later in the season. Flax calls. He says the Klingon is waking up. Archer and Hoshi head down to sickbay. At first, the translator seems to be doing well. It can handle the basics. Where am I? Who are you? Where are we going? As the conversation gets more complex, like when the Klingon wants to know what happened to his ship and why are you doing this, it turns out the Vulcans gave them the Bing Klingon translator app. It starts spouting out gibberish like eating the afterlife. Personally, I think he was saying, I'll eat your grandma out in hell. Slacks has a different theory. It looks like the guy is having a stroke. The ship rattles. The warp reactor goes down and there's a blackout on all decks. Reed thought he saw something, but he couldn't tell if it was a sensor ghost or not. Of course, we, the audience, get to see the lizard people aboard the ship. Clang knows it too and becomes enraged. Hoshi gets a quick glance at the creatures, so they go hunting for them in the dark. When they find them, Archer orders a security guy to shoot him. Clang gets one word out before sedation kicks in. Suliban. A brawl ensues. The lizard guys grab Clang and disappear. Later, on the bridge, once everything is working again, Reed mentions the odd scan. Archer orders some science stuff. He says Clang seemed to know what was going on, so Hoshi, you fix the translator. Paul tells him not to blame himself. He says, hey, I ordered some science stuff. Do your job and get out of my face. Paul says, see, this is why we didn't want you guys doing this. Now we're going to have to go all the way back to San Francisco to use the observatory. Archer says we'll make do with what we've got. Is that understood? Paul says, no Klingon, no mission. Archer says, there's no mission when I say there's no mission. Paul says, what do you expect me to do? You're being an idiot. Archer shouts, my office, now. Once there, he says, you don't badmouth me in front of my crew. If I say we can still go find the Klingon, then that's what we're going to do. Understood? She says, yeah, but. Archer says, you contradict yourself. You either understand or you don't. And if you don't understand, you don't belong on my ship, let alone my bridge. Phlox is examining the Suliban corpse they got during the fight. Archer says, what do you got? Phlox says, good news and bad news. The good news is the Klingon was right. This is indeed a Suliban. The bad news is it isn't exactly a Suliban. Archer asks, what? Phlox says, it has several anatomy changes. Extra bronchial chambers, super eyes, chameleon skin. Archer says, so he's a mutant. Phlox says, with one or two abnormalities, I'd say that's a possibility, but this would require complex genetic engineering. The gene markers seem to indicate that it happened very recently. Archer asks, where could he have had this done? Phlox says, oh, he could go almost anywhere. I know you humans aren't too keen on it because of the whole Tom thing, but to each their own. Meanwhile, down in engineering, in spite of thinking she wouldn't find anything, DePaul has found something. Trip says, well, I could have done that. DePaul says, no, you couldn't. I had to use my Vulcan techno magic on it. Trip says, and whose fault is it that we don't have that? Oh, right. DePaul says, I don't have to take this. Trip says, it seems to me that you do. You're part of this crew. So you should know something about loyalty. Oh, wait. That would take the E word. Archer says to break it up and report. DePaul says she's reversed the polarity of the neutron flow to detect the warp trail. It will just take a little while to complete an analysis. Hoshi comes down to report what she learned from reviewing the transcripts from the Klingon. It amounts to Jack and Archer asks if the Klingon said anything about the Suliban. Hoshi says, nope. T'Pol asks, why do you want to know about them? They're the Canadians of the galaxy. Hoshi says it doesn't matter. There were only 4 words she couldn't translate. Selleck, Rigel, Saren, and Folia. T'Pol says Rigel 10 is a world you're not ready to visit yet. From what I scavenged from the Klingon ship, it was the last place they visited. Archer says, why didn't you tell us that? T'Pol says, I wasn't authorized to. I could be in some serious shit with Vulcan High Command for telling you this. Archer says, if you ever withhold need-to-know information from me again, you'll be spending the rest of this voyage in Porthos's crate. Understood? Then he calls up to the bridge and orders Mayweather to change course for Rigel 10. Meanwhile, the Klingon is being interrogated by the Suliban. Their leader Silik asks, where's the MacGuffin? The Klingon says, I don't know. So they ask again. The Klingon says, how should I know? The outside observer says, are we sure that truth serum is working? The tech guy says, yep. So they all go, Silik asks, did you leave it on the Enterprise? The Klingon says, nope. Silik asks, what were you doing on Rigel 10? The Klingon says, I was there because I know a guy. Silik says, who? The Klingon says, you got me. It's a Suliban woman named Saren. Silik asks, did she give you anything? The Klingon says, nope. Unless you count crabs. Silik says, fine. I'll come to extract info later. Archer and company load up into a shuttle bay. It's got a real, your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to go to level 38 of the complex on Rigel 10 and find the Klingon vibe to it. T'Pol warns them about all the new aliens they might encounter. Trip quips that she didn't warn them not to drink the water. She says, Flock said not to worry about that, but don't fuck anyone when you're down there. And they're off. They land at Baltimore's Inner Harbor on the coldest night of December. You might not think it's Baltimore, but Trip and DePaul are walking around and they see this. So it's either Friday night at Power Plant Live, or DePaul just told him to turn his head and look away from, well, let's just say there's a reason Star Trek SVU isn't a thing. Reed and Travis are at this nightclub watching exotic dancers with frog tongues eat some butterflies. The entire crowd seems aroused. I half expect Jason and the other ice pirates to show up. A frog guy asks if they'd like to have a private lap dance. Reed is intrigued, but Ensign Buzzkill reminds him that they've still got to find Clang. Meanwhile, Trip has managed to sneak his way backstage on Rigel Penn's Got Talent. The other contestants suck. His stiffest competition is Boyd dying from asthma attacks. T'Pol is negotiating to find out what's going on here. Then she calls Archer and says that security has no record of Clang, but she did find out about a little Kronos district where the Klingons go for live meat. Trip notices a woman stealing a nebulizer from Asthma Kid. T'Pol says, don't do anything. Until the age of 4, that species can only breathe methyl oxide. She's trying to help him acclimate to his new lungs. Your intentions are good, but you've got to learn when to interfere and when not to. As they walk away, they don't even notice a Suliban right behind them. Oops. Hoshi and Archer head to Little Kronos. Apparently a large number of Klingons is 2 guys. Archer calls T'Pol to make sure they're in the right place, but they must have Boost Mobile because their calls get dropped. So Archer gets out his gun, which gives the Suliban all the motivation they need to pop out of nowhere and grab them. They put Hoshi in the same holding cell where they've already got Trip and T'Pol, but they put Archer in an empty room. He hears this woman say, "You came here looking for Clang." He asks, "Who are you?" She steps out of the shadows and says, "My name is Saren. Now who were the people who took Clang?" Archer says, "Well, they look like your friends, so I assumed you did." "Wait, you don't look like a Suliban." She says, "Would that turn you on? Because I totally can. Look, I know how this is gonna go. I continue to be obtuse. You threaten me. I mention my badass allies. You don't believe me. I say that no matter how bad they are, I make them look like Ernest P. Worrell. Now, what do you want with Clang? You don't answer me, so I try to seduce you." Archer says, "As much as I'd like that, I gotta go. I was just his space Uber back to Kronos." She says that's not a good idea. The Klingons will kill him, maybe you too, and then we'll never get the smash. She kisses him and then shapeshifts. She says, "Look, I'm not really into you. I've been made empathic, but it requires physical contact." Archer says, "You really are a Suliban?" She says, "Yeah, but I'm not a member of the Cabal or anything." He says, "The what now?" She explains that a good number of Suliban have joined this transhumanist trans-Sulibanist movement funded by these freaky guys that they never see. She was a member for a while. The first few gene mods were free, but then they started charging an arm and a leg, or giving you wet work assignments. They're sort of the Suliban version of Scientology. She suspects these guys have Clang. Archer asks why. She says that she gave Clang evidence that these Suliban were disguising themselves as a rebel Klingon faction and launching attacks in Klingon space. Archer says that doesn't make a lot of sense. She says, yeah, if you're making your own decisions, but if you're lackeys for a faction in a war across time and space, it makes total sense. Trust me. Archer says that sounds like a you problem. I can guess what he's thinking. Note to self, when I'm head of Starfleet, write general order prohibiting interference in the internal politics of unaligned societies. It's more trouble than it's worth. She tells Archer that she can get them to the other's compound, but he'll need to take her and her people with him. He says, stop holding my people hostage and I'll think about it. She lets them go and even gives them their guns back right as the other Suliban attack. They flee, and their escape goes so well that Saren and all her people wind up dead. They make their way to the third floor shuttle bay when they forget that they parked in the itchy lot. They call Reed and Mayweather to tell them, you better hurry up. It's snowing pretty hard. If we don't take off soon, we're going to be stuck here all winter. Archer keeps looking for them in the snow. Reed says he's never seen lightning in a snowstorm before. I have. Thunder snow does not look like that. Plus, you'd think a security officer would know a blaster fight when he saw one. They come up with the bright idea of using the shuttle's sensors, but there's too much interference to detect human life signs. So they try Vulcan. But that doesn't do much good since DePaul is banging on the door. They open the hatch and let her in, then take off for a rescue. Trip, DePaul, and Hoshi make it to safety. DePaul goes back for Archer, who's been taking on the Suliban single-handed. She says, you should get out of here, you're the captain, plus the whole enhanced Vulcan abilities thing. He says, no, my crew, my responsibility, now get the hell out of here. Of course, once Archer gets hit, they disobey orders and rescue him. Mayweather says, I hate to say this, but during the fight, the thrusters took a hit. T'Pol asks, will she still fly? Mayweather says, maybe? T'Pol says, then let's get the hell out of here. The Suliban look confused and go ask HR for guidance. Meanwhile, DePaul calls the Enterprise and tells them they'll be docking in 4 minutes. Have Phlox meet them in decon because Archer is wounded. Remember that bit at the beginning with Archer and his dad building a model space shuttle? The writers do, and we get to find out what happened when he flew it. It was a disaster. Not a me at my driver's test level disaster, but close enough. His dad tells him to follow the wind and learn to trust it. Later, we see Trip and DePaul in decontamination. They have to stay in there longer because they got exposed to some weird virus. But Archer's gonna be fine. In the meantime, we get to see Trip and DePaul arguing about chain of command of a Vulcan on an Earth vessel while they strip down to their underwear and rub gel over each other in soft light, which is totally not fan service. Archer wakes up a few hours later. DePaul says while she was in command, they got underway. Archer asks, how soon will we be back to Earth? She says, I upgraded the sensors and we've been tracking the Suliban. Archer says, what? DePaul says, yeah, Trip went on and on about how you would want to see this through, and as acting captain, it was my job to anticipate your desires. Archer says, as acting captain, you could have done anything you want. DePaul says, yeah, but not all of us are selfish pricks. You get pissed at me when I do what I think is right, and you get pissed at me for doing what you want. Why are you so fucking determined to hate me? Archer spends some time in his cabin updating his log and spending time with Porthos. He gets called up to the bridge. They found a planet at the end of the trail. But it's surrounded by fragments of radiation. To make things more difficult, each fragment has a different decay rate. T'Pol tells them to scan for the trajectory of the fragments. That gives them a new path to follow. The Suliban are hiding on the other side of the planet. They polarize their hull plating and get their phasers running hot because it is time for a shootout in space. Or it would be, if it weren't for the commercial break. When we return, Selleck is talking to his supervisor. The big bad evil guy asks, "Is Archer here for Clang or for you?" Selleck says, "I don't know." Future guy asks, "Does he know about Saren's message?" Selleck says, "I don't know." Big bad evil guy says, "You don't know Jack and and you brought the humans and the Vulcans into this way too soon.
Jess, I hate to interrupt, but Ralph left a joke for this scene in your voicemail.
Do you want me to send you back where you were, unemployed in Greenland?" The Enterprise is flying through the atmosphere looking for Suliban ships. They encounter a space station. They get fired on. "We cannot take much more of this, Captain." So they retreat. And that's how they get a better view. The space station is composed of hundreds of Suliban ships combined into a megazord. They detect one non-Suliban life sign on board. They assume it's Clang. They try to figure out the best way to get him out. They consider the transporter too risky. They'll have to board. The only way they can do that is if they have a Suliban ship. The easiest way to get one would be to go into the liquid atmosphere of the planet, release their magnetic shuttle grappler, and go fishing for one. The Suliban show up and attack. Malcolm Reed is clearly playing Galaga, but he's LARPing it, so it's sort of his job. They get blasted until their hull plating depolarizes, but they are successful in using their improvised claw machine. Big deal. It's $5 and you play till you win. Now that they have a Suliban ship, they still have to figure out how to fly it. Mayweather thinks he can do it. Too bad they're sending Trip and Archer over to kick ass. T'Pol takes Archer aside and tells him not to go. Archer accuses her of being emotional. She says, "No, this is motivated self-interest. If you succeed, yeah, you'll have proven your independence. But if you fail, I end up taking the blame for your fuck-up." Reed comes in and says, "Hey, I've got 2 new toys for you. This here is our version of the laser weapon the Suliban had. And this here, during the Kuzma gig, should disrupt the magnetic coupling system of the Megazord." Trip and Archer fly off. An alarm sounds. Trip says that Mayweather told them that the check engine light always goes off at first and to ignore it. They have a hard time finding a parking place and an even harder time finding a spot to plug in their microwave. Plus, they have to fight off a bunch of Suliban on their way to Klang's cell. Meanwhile, Hoshi intercepts some communications right before the Suliban attack. This allows them to dodge the brunt of it. They debate whether or not they should move. If they do, chances are Archer won't be able to find them again. But if they don't, they're going to be blown up good. So move it is. Trip and Archer find Clang. He is not happy to see them. He attacks them. Archer raises his gun and says, "You come with me peacefully, or I shoot you and drag you back. That won't be good for either of us." Clang reluctantly agrees. Then he sees they're going to have to fight Suliban on their way out and completely changes his tune. So while Trip and Archer are nonplussed, Clang is pleased as punch. Clang and Trip make it back to the pod. Archer turns on the Whoosmagig. It works a little faster than expected, so Archer is screwed. He tells Trip to get the hell out of there because the mission is more important than him. Trip says, Starfleet is a promise. I give my life for you, you give your life for me, and nobody gets left behind. Archer says, yeah, so come back for me later. So, Trip and Clang leave. Back on the ship, the crew are looking for the shuttle pod and the Suliban. They find nothing. Hoshi thinks she hears something. She must have spent an awful lot of her childhood listening to low-powered AM stations at night because she's able to find the message from Tucker hidden amongst the static. He ignites his exhaust so they'll be able to find him. Once they get him back on board, they ask him what happened to Archer. He says, I'm sorry, I lost him. Meanwhile, Archer is exploring the remains of the station. He stumbles into the blurry, out-of-focus room the Suliban used to contact Future Guy. Archer looks confused, but then again, it might just be because he can't find Dean Stockwell. Trip tells T'Pol they've got to go back for Archer. T'Pol says, according to your own report, I'm obeying the orders of Captain Archer, you dumb fool. Trip says, what are you talking about? T'Pol says, Archer was doing this for the sake of galactic security. Even an idiot can see that his ambiguous later meant when the mission is over and I'm in a casket. Trip says, just because he said something to that effect right before he ordered me to leave doesn't mean... T'Pol says, enough! We've got to think about this logically. Trip says, you mean like he did when he rescued you from that gunfight on Rigel 10? T'Pol says, yeah, exactly like that. Back in the LSD room, Archer hears this voice say, Clang doesn't know anything. Oh yeah, and don't fire your gun. The whole room is flooded with tachyons. It'd be like lighting a room full of coffee creamer on fire. Archer wants to know what's going on. The voice says, yeah, I can't tell you that, John. I've got to be a vague and mysterious villain to take up 3/4 of the series, don't you know? Back on the ship, T'Pol is telling Trip to modify this console for some reason. Trip says, I do not like this plan. T'Pol says, you don't have to like it. You just gotta do it. Meanwhile, Stilik disappears into thin air. He says if Saren had told him what was in Clang's message, he wouldn't be trying to do this. He would have just blown the place to Kingdom Come. So he's no threat. Archer says, hey, that invisibility thing is cool, but is it a reward for making the Klingons engage in internal conflicts? Or something related to this temporal Cold War? Stilik says, aw man, why'd you have to go and say that? I could have told you when you were going to die, but now I have to kill you, which would create a whole new timeline, and I'll be filling out paperwork for months. He shoots Archer, but because the room is so wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, he misses. Stilik rants and raves about genetic engineering and Suliban superiority. Archer points out that they can't be superior if they have to get their gene mods from outsiders. Then he bolts for the door. They make it out into the hallway and battle it out like school kids. Back on Enterprise, T'Pol asks if there's any way to get Archer's pod out with the grappler. Mayweather says, nope. T'Pol says, well, it's a good thing I have Trip working on a backup plan. We'd better use it. Stilik takes one last shot at Archer. It's about to hit him, but that console Trip was working on, by the law of Chekhov's gun, it's the transporter. And I mean Anton Chekhov, the playwright, not this guy. Yeah, this is a Star Trek video, so I actually have to clarify. They make their way to Kronos. They try to be all friendly and neighborly, but Klang ruins it by saying something about disgrace and death. The Klingons take a sample of his blood, and it turns out that's how Saren encoded her message. They go back to the ship. Because he's got some downtime, Archer decides to give Porthos a bath. Trip and T'Pol come in. He says, I told Admiral Forth about our little adventure, and he was excited. He got to turn the tables on Vulcan High Command. Oh, by the way, T'Pol, the Vulcans are going to pick you up in a few days. She asked, why? I thought you were going to drop me off on Earth. Archer said, nah, Starfleet decided to leave us out here. I think Phlox is going to want to stick around. He asked to speak to T'Pol in private. He says if I'm going to be a better captain, I've got to learn to leave a lot of stupid things behind me, including my prejudices and preconceptions. I have to admit this mission would have gone sideways without you, which means I have a very serious problem. I can't request a liaison officer between Starfleet and Vulcan High Command without undermining Earth's growing independence, which I think you'll agree is a good thing and an eventuality. T'Pol says, but if I call Admiral Forrest and Vulcan High Command to suggest the idea, and you don't object, Archer smiles and says, yeah, you get the idea. They walk out onto the bridge. Archer says, okay, we've got 2 white guys, a black guy, a half-British, half-Malaysian guy, a Japanese woman, 2 aliens, and a beagle for a bridge crew. It looks like we've got ourselves a Star Trek show. And that's it. That's the pilot. I've got something to say, and it is going to piss off a lot of Star Trek fans. The Enterprise pilot has its flaws, mostly in clumsy and clunky expositional dialogue, but it is not the worst series opener for a Star Trek show. Nobody is going to say that Broken Bow is as good as The Cage, the first pilot for Star Trek the original series, or even the not quite as good second pilot where No Man Has Gone Before. It is not the masterstroke that is Star Trek Lower Decks Second Contact. It doesn't have that feeling of this is not your mom and dad's Star Trek that you get from Deep Space Nine, The Emissary. It isn't the thing of beauty that is Discovery's Vulcan Hello. And it's far from the contemplative burst of anti-nostalgia that is Star Trek Picard. I think 50% of fans will agree that Broken Bow is better than Voyager's pilot The Caretaker. But I'll take it a step further. I'm willing to say that Broken Bow is better than Star Trek The Next Generation's first episode, Encounter at Farpoint. Star Trek The Next Generation will always have a special place in my heart for being my starter Star Trek. But a few bright spots aside, the first 2.5 seasons are god-awful. Now, on to more Enterprise.
Jess, I know you can go on talking about Star Trek all day, but not counting the verdict block. The script is 18 pages, which translates to 2 to 3 times that length in minutes.
Well, Xylo did give me 3 Star Trek-themed episodes, so let me do something first.
Verdict TBA. You can do that?
I can now.
Which episodes do you want to do?
The Andorian Incident and Cold Front. If you liked this video, please hit like and subscribe to see this channel grow and get your name on the credits. Visit patreon.com/ParityErrorFilms and become a patron today!
Where am I?
Where? When? Such things are irrelevant. You are in your present. I am from what you would consider the future.
How did I get here?
Your defeat. Your death was an error in time that needed correcting.
So I was supposed to kill Jess?
No. That too was a temporal aberration in need of repair.
Then why did you save me?
We had foreseen a conflict. One where my time is at war with your era and your past. Your time is at war with its past and future. The past is at war with your time and mine. All of them will be in conflict with something else.
What's this got to do with me?
I don't know. But it involves him. To avoid further aberrations, we may need an agent in your time to take care of things. You interested?
Yes?
Good. The implication was we would kill you again if you were not.